The focus of some of our work in LT2 on Tuesday will be on feedback. We're going to look at ways to calibrate and even develop a bank of feedback that we can use in evaluation. How timely was it then that Ed Leadership was focused on feedback? And in particular, we're going to look at the article 7 Keys to Effective Feedback and have some conversation about that. That article is attached as a PDF to your email, and I hope you'll read it before the next meeting. Your feedback for me on this slide may have to do with the shameless inclusion of a picture of my little boy in his Zionsville shirt, but I felt like I needed to include it just because he looks so nice and green. On this page, I'll ask you maybe even to pause it for a moment and read through some of the words here. This is not from the article itself, but I think there's some good points about the impact of our feedback and about what feedback is or is not, ways for us to make it effective for folks. The terminology in this, and really throughout not only the article but the whole magazine, it's written in terms of feedback from teachers to students. I think if we kind of substitute that relationship with the administrator or evaluator to teacher relationship, that we can kind of get at ways that this will apply for us in our setting. So again, if you want to pause and just read a few of these words, maybe they'll contribute to our conversation as well. Here's another slide that'd be useful to pause and read a few items. I included it because of the assumptions that folks can have based upon our feedback, and particularly the orientation of that feedback, whether it's comfort-oriented or strategy-focused. And you'll see that here in this bullet point indicated with the star. It does continue onto this page, or this column as well. So again, maybe pause this and read some of that as reference. This page is included not necessarily because of the content as it relates to our discussion, but because I see a real interesting connection between feedback and video games. Some authors and some research studies are making some connections here that I think are real helpful not only for students but for staff who are more digitally literate. This may be interesting to you or not. On the next slide, I actually have a book that's toward this end, and I'll post it for just a moment so you can see that. But again, this is just a connection that I make that I find interesting, and while it may not bear upon our conversation today, maybe it's food for thought in the future. This is that book I was referencing a moment ago, The Gamification of Learning and Instruction. I think it's interesting not only from the standpoint of thinking about how students and teachers can interact, but also for us as we seek to do some of the same things about increasing learning, retention, and application. We're speaking to digital learners as well. Not only our teachers are speaking to digital learners and students, but we're speaking to them as teachers become more literate too. So again, I just mention it because it may have some relevance to our conversation, but the thrust of what we want to get at is that feedback piece. So our task coming up on Tuesday will be to look at these 7 keys to effective feedback in the article. That's a PDF attached to this email. These are those 7 feedback essentials that the author speaks about. And we'll talk about each one as it relates not only to our practice and how we reflect on our own ability to give feedback to staff, but we'll try and relate them to individual examples of feedback that have been given that we can glean from the SFS software. And we'll kind of calibrate them and talk about how we see these 7 keys in those examples. Just to be clear then, for Tuesday, please ahead of that meeting, read the article, think about the feedback essentials, and let's be prepared to examine our own feedback practices in light of what we read. I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think that feedback piece and how we're able to tailor that, hone it as a group, and that inter-rater reliability as it relates to feedback should be a good discussion.